This morning, then, I like to preach from Numbers 15, and in connection with that, let's turn first to Leviticus. That's the book before that, Leviticus chapter 7. We'll read 11 verses, 28 to 38. You find Leviticus 7 on page 85. But we'll pick up at verse 28, which you find on page 86. And by diving into Leviticus 7, also the book of Numbers, we're entering, you could say, into the world of Israel in the days of the wandering through the wilderness. It's a very different world than ours. Of course, in those days, too, and thereafter, they were used to sacrificing. And here's all kinds of legislation about the peace offering. And actually, this comes as a bit of a conclusion about legislation, detailed legislation that we can find very foreign to us today, about how the sacrifices had to be brought, what was all involved, the procedures used, the ceremonies to be followed, etc. And yet, it's important for us to realize that we read this not just out of a sense of interest or honoring the past, but realizing our God holds this in front of us today as well to think about and to meditate on. So let's pick up at verse 28 of chapter 7 and read to the end of the chapter. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, whoever offers the sacrifice of his peace offerings to the Lord shall bring his offering to the Lord from the sacrifice of his peace offerings. His own hands shall bring the Lord's food offerings. He shall bring the fat with the breast, and the breast may be waved as a wave offering before the Lord. The priest shall burn the fat on the altar, but the breast shall be for Aaron and his sons. And the right thigh you shall give to the priest as a contribution from the sacrifice of your peace offerings. Whoever among the sons of Aaron offers the blood of the peace offerings and the fat shall have the right thigh for a portion. For the breast that is waved and the thigh that is contributed, I have taken from the people of Israel out of the sacrifices of their peace offerings, and have given them to Aaron the priest and to his sons as a perpetual due from the people of Israel. This is the portion of Aaron and of his sons from the Lord's food offerings, from the day they were presented to serve as priests of the Lord. The Lord commanded this to be given them by the people of Israel from the day that he anointed them. It is a perpetual due throughout their generations." And then we have a bit of a concluding paragraph. "This is the law of the burnt offering, of the grain offering, of the sin offering, of the guilt offering, of the ordination offering, and of the peace offering, which the Lord commanded Moses on Mount Sinai on the day that he commanded the people of Israel to bring their offerings to the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai." So this was given already when God gave the law before Israel set out from Mount Sinai. Let's now sing together, standing, Psalm 71, stanzas 10 and 11, rejoicing in the comfort of God that he gives to us, even in the midst of bitter cares. We'll get back to that in our sermon. So Psalm 71, 10 and 11. From the book of Leviticus, then, we turn to the book of Numbers, chapter 15. Numbers 15, we'll read verses 1 through 16. That will be our text. That's on page 123. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land you are to inhabit, which I am giving you, and you offer to the Lord from the herd or from the flock a food offering or a burnt offering or a sacrifice to fulfill a vow or as a freewill offering, or at your appointed feasts to make a pleasing aroma to the Lord, then he who brings his offering shall offer to the Lord a grain offering of 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with 1/4 of a hin of oil, and you shall offer with the burnt offering or for the sacrifice 1/4 of a hin of wine for the drink offering for each lamb. Or for a ram you shall offer for a grain offering 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with 1/3 of a hin of oil. And for the drink offering you shall offer 1/3 of a hin of wine, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And when you offer a bull as a burnt offering or sacrifice to fulfill a vow or for peace offerings to the Lord, then one shall offer with the bull a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with 1/2 a hin of oil, and you shall offer for the drink offering 1/2 a hin of wine, as a food offering, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. Thus it shall be done for each bull or ram, or for each lamb or young goat. As many as you offer, so shall you do with each one, as many as there are. Every native Israelite shall do these things in this way, in offering a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And if a stranger is sojourning with you, or anyone is living permanently among you, and he wishes to offer a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord, he shall do as you do. For the assembly there shall be one statute for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you, a statute forever throughout your generations. You and the sojourner shall be like before the Lord. One law and one rule shall be for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you." Beloved congregation of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, let me begin this morning by painting before you a scenario. There's a son who's working for his father in a landscaping business, and this son has messed up quite badly. Instead of using a very high-end skid steer responsibly, he's proceeded to have lots of fun with it, fiddle around with it, to try to impress his colleagues at work with it, but in the process, there's been a mishap, a serious one. The machine is completely destroyed. And the father is angry. In a way, he's had it with his son. And that's because this is not the first time. Not even the second time. And therefore he speaks some rather harsh words to his son, even to the point where he says to him, "Son, you know that we planned that you would take over this business next year. You're clearly not ready for that." That's how they leave on Friday afternoon. There's a weekend. And then comes Monday morning. And the son, just like everyone else, all the other employees, he shows up at the yard. He's sullen. He's dejected. But with the father, it's different. The father, just as he always does, so now this morning he does exactly the same thing. He gives everyone, including the son, a standard list of things to do, of jobs that are expected to be done, of matters that they have to tend to. But in receiving his instructions that Monday morning, the son actually receives quite the encouragement from his father. In the first place, he's not been let go. And more than that, in the instructions, the father has kind of just quietly slipped in a few instructions, a few comments. When you're at plant B, pay close attention to how they manage the excess water there. It's important for you to know, especially when the time comes for you to run this business yourself. The son catches it. The father, without downplaying what the son has done, without taking back any of the consequences he made known, yet the father, with these words, still thereby encourages his son. Yes, there are implications, but not all is lost. There's hope. And I mention that because that's the kind of scenario, perhaps you don't pick up on that right away, but that's the kind of scenario that's going on in our passage. May proclaim God's word this morning then under this theme. The Lord instructs his reeling people to bring flour, oil, and wine along with certain offerings. We'll see the actual content of the instruction in our first point, and secondly, we'll see the reassuring nature of this instruction, and finally, the abiding relevance of this instruction. We're jumping this morning right into the middle of the book of Numbers, and precisely because we're doing it that way, it might not strike us right away, but Numbers 15 has a very strikingly different character than Numbers 14. A different character in content, different in tone, very different. You see, Numbers 14, it's a well-known chapter in the book of Numbers. It's about the rebellion. Shortly after crossing the Red Sea, after Mount Sinai, Moses sent out those 12 spies to spy out the land, and 10 came back with a very evil report. There are giants all over the place. We are very small compared to them. The cities are walled. There's no way we can take the land. And the people are devastated. And they will not even listen to the other 2 spies who very correctly remind the people, yeah, it's true, but we have the Lord. They were about to stone Joshua and Caleb to death when they reminded them of the Lord. And right at that point, God appears to his people. And he comes on the scene, you could say, in anger. Very deep anger. God's ready to destroy Israel. And then Moses intervenes. Lord, don't do that. Please forgive your people. And amazingly, the Lord hears that prayer of Moses. He will forgive. He does forgive. But he also makes clear there are going to be implications. 40 years now. For 40 years, Israel will wander in this wilderness. All those currently older than 20 will die. God's very clear about this too. Israel, turn back, go back into the wilderness. That's Numbers 14. Now, Numbers 15 is very different. It reads almost as if Numbers 14 was just kind of this bad dream that never happened. It just seems out of place. In our passage, our God suddenly speaks about several offerings by fire. The ESV speaks of food offerings, but the footnote mentions offerings by fire. The thing is, these offerings all involved being burned. And our passage lists 4 of these offerings. First of all, there's a burnt offering. With a burnt offering, the entire animal was burned on the altar that expressed total devotion to the Lord. Secondly, is a sacrifice to fulfill a vow. That was kind of a thank offering. One would bring after vowing to do something, and the Lord granted that vow, granted that petition, then they would bring such a sacrifice. Third one was a free will offering. It's also a thank offering. That was something someone could bring to the Lord rather spontaneously. For example, they received a very beautiful shower of rain upon their crops. At right the time, they might bring such a free will offering. And with these thank offerings, what happened there, part of the animal was burned. The other part, God gave back to the person making the sacrifice, gave it back to him so that he could receive this meat as a gift from God, so that he and his household could then eat a festive meal at the house of God. God is aware, it's very beautiful. He hosted a festive meal for the people to enjoy at his house. The last thing mentioned are sacrifices at your appointed feasts. These were festive offerings with which Israel as a whole expressed joy and gladness for the great deeds of God. How he rescued them out of Egypt, think of Passover. How he sustained them through the wilderness, we can think of the Feast of Booths. And how he gave them food and gave them his law, we can think of the Feast of Weeks. Now, what unites all these 4 kinds of offerings together is that each of these sacrifices, and each one, they were put on the altar and would be burned, and therefore they would give off a smell that would please God. Verse 3, offer to the Lord from the herd or from the flock a food offering, or a burnt offering, or a sacrifice, or a freewill offering, or at your appointed feast, to make a pleasing aroma to the Lord. What's that remind you of? I think it reminds us of what happens at the flood. One of the first things that Noah did after he left the ark was to build an altar, to offer on that altar a burnt offering to the Lord, the God who in his great wrath had just flooded the entire world. And then we read in Genesis 8:21, when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma from that sacrifice, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man. For the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. You see what happened there? The Lord's anger was turned away by that smell. And instead, his heart once again went out to mankind. And therefore, these 4 offerings, they depicted the restoration of a good relationship where God looked kindly upon his people again, where his face once again shone down upon them. And people then would bring these sacrifices especially for that reason. That is, in thankfulness to God, they expressed that they wanted now to please him. These sacrifices, they taught the people Your God, O people, is a God who delights in your gratitude, your devotion to Him. That smells wonderful to Him. Again, pleasing aroma, mentioned no less than 3 times in our passage. Now, by the time of our passage in Numbers, the Lord had already instructed His people about how to bring all these different sacrifices. We read just a bit of it, but you'll find it all in Leviticus 1 to Leviticus 7. And now here in Numbers, God does not repeat everything that we find there. But what He does in our passage is suddenly, almost out of the blue, adds another stipulation He has not mentioned before. Israel, when you come into the land, then I want you not only to take a lamb, a ram, or a bull, but with these, I want you to take 3 more commodities as you make your sacrifices. I want you to take grain, oil, and wine. Now, why? Well, the grain, the oil, and the wine would particularly enhance the odor of these sacrifices. And more, these commodities, grain, oil, and wine, would also greatly enhance, as you can only imagine, the festive meal that would be eaten afterwards. Now there would not only be meat on the table, but also baked goods, perhaps even wine. And therefore, in our passage, what our God does, He adds some ingredients to enhance the smell, first of all, and secondly, to enhance the festive meal. And therefore, to enhance the smell that this meal represented, to enhance the delight in good relationships. And our God found this very important. The grain, the oil, and the wine had to be added every single time again. Whether the offering was a small lamb, a larger ram, or even a large bull, it had to be there every time again. The aroma had to be enhanced. Every time again, the festive meal thereafter also had to be enhanced. And then our God goes on to specify that this shall be done by every native Israelite. And it goes further, this shall be done even by every stranger or sojourner who happens to be in Israel, even if the sacrificer is a non-Israelite, he too shall add the grain, the oil, and the wine. That's the gist of verses 13 to 16. Why? That brings us to our second point, the reassuring nature of this instruction. Our passage opens in a very standard way for the book of Numbers. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying. You find this phrase again and again, especially just before the rebellion. But given what happened in Numbers 14, these words are extremely striking. It's almost as if the rebellion and everything that happened thereafter, including the execution of the 10 spies, including the sentencing for 40 years into the desert, including the announcement that all those 20 years old and older will die. Imagine receiving an announcement like that. It's almost as if that never happened. Things just go back the way they were before Numbers 14, before the rebellion. Goes back to the situation of God giving instructions to Moses and Moses passing on these instructions to the people. And it's true. In a way, our passage has a getting back to it kind of character. Using our opening analogy, Friday was a bad day. And no, my son, you're not going to take over this company this year anymore. And now it's Monday. And as such, it's time to get back to normal, just like it was before. And so here, there had indeed been a very bad day. Israel will not be entering into the promised land anytime soon. And now it's another Monday. Time to pick up where we left off before. But still, having said that, when we consider matters more deeply, we see the Lord does not just drop this matter entirely. At first, it seems that way. He just moves on. But it's not quite the case. Notice some details. First of all, literally, he says to Moses, the Lord speaking to Moses, speak to the sons of Israel. No, not to these people. That's how it's spoken of in Numbers 14. No, speak to the sons, to my sons and daughters, Moses. You see the message. O Israel, I know you are reeling. But let me assure you, I still see you as my sons and my daughters. I gave my word to you, Israel, to Moses when he prayed to me for you. I have pardoned your rebellion, and I have done that. Yes, your rebellion will have its implications, but you are still my precious possession among all the nations in this world. And then a second detail. Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land, notice the when, not if, but when. In the rebellion, the people had concluded getting into the promised land, that will never happen. They even started going back to Egypt. And God had then responded, indeed, you no longer will enter that land. Only your children will. And now God basically says, my people, realize, even though you're crying, even though you're reeling, realize the way into the promised land. It's still open. And as my people, you most certainly will one day get there. My people, don't lose sight of that. And notice also how he speaks of the land you are to inhabit, the land which I am giving you. Another detail, he then commands them to bring with those offerings flour, oil, and wine. These are all, what are they? These are agricultural products of a settled community. And he also commands them not just to bring flour, or any flour, but fine flour, top-notch stuff. And so he commands them to bring wine, a festive drink, in such quantity that they can just freely pour it out. My people, I know that you do not have these commodities at present. But that's what's coming. Think again, my people, of that single cluster of grapes that had to be carried over the shoulder by two men. Think of the pomegranates, the figs. No, do not spiral down into never-ending lamentation. Look what we chucked out. We were so dumb. Rather, see anew what these things, they still do mean. The Lord is bringing his people into the promised land. And that land, truly, it's good, it's glorious, it's wonderful. And one more detail. Notice how in verse 13 the Lord suddenly speaks of every native Israelite. My people, yes, you will wander as strangers, not as natives, but as strangers in the desert for 40 years. But there will still be native Israelites. Verse 14 even literally speaks of generations of native Israelites. And within that context, the Lord then also speaks of strangers or sojourners who are not Israelites by birth, and yet have joined to that special nation of Israel, and they've come to worship the Lord as well. The day will yet come when Israel will indeed become a blessing to the surrounding nations, and the people will come and join Israel, just as God had promised Abraham. And therefore the message becomes clear here. My people, yes, there are consequences to what you've done, but I have pardoned. And therefore you have hope. And keep in mind also how the physical land of Canaan, though indeed quite the land in and of itself, it was only a foreshadowing of the true promised land. Think also of the many saints who have gone before you. In the words of Hebrews 11, you could speak this way to Israel in the desert too. All these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised. Think of God's faithful people slaving away in Egypt. Since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. They should not get the full inheritance. My reeling people here, despite what has happened, there is hope. My kingdom, which started before you, which you went against, but which continues with you, which continues beyond you, which is beyond this life, my kingdom, my people, is still marching forward. So how should we now move forward? How should we move on? Even in the face of missteps? Even in times of periods of missteps in our lives? Beloved, we should move forward in hope. We should move forward in worship. It comes out especially in verse 4. It's hard to translate this verse literally. It's a 4-word sentence in the original. And in a 4-word sentence, the word for drawing near or worshiping is used 3 times over in slight variation. He shall bring near, the one bringing near, he is bringing near to the Lord. Oh, my people, don't pull away from me. Even in these circumstances, even after all this has happened, don't pull away from me, but draw near to me. See what that smell of your sacrifices, understand what that means to me. To me, it's a pleasing aroma. And I want you to understand that, my people. That's why I'm enhancing the smell. That's why I'm enhancing the festivities. My people, see and understand also in these circumstances what I love. See what prompts me to shine my face down upon you. What prompts me to do that? It's you. It's you drawing near to me for worship. It's you bringing sacrifices to express your gratitude. And beloved, I hope you catch it. That's our God today too. Is that not so comforting to see as we come to worship our God while living in this world, this broken world, in which we at times also together and personally have messed up in our lives, in how we've handled matters, in how we've responded to specific challenges. We can at times have heavy burdens to bear. We might be dealing with direct consequences of foolish actions or foolish decisions on our part. Maybe we have compromised health because of reckless living. Maybe we have an addiction because of foolish choices, or a disrupted family because of poor leadership, or financial loss because of mismanagement. And that brings us to our final point, the abiding relevance of this instruction. Indeed, with this passage, our God today too speaks to us as well. My gathered people here, also in 2024, here in Glanbrook, especially as you deal with the burdens of life, stand back and ponder who your God is. No, do not allow the consequences and those burdens and those setbacks in your life, do not allow those things to tell you, well, you know, God just has it in for you. It's true, it might be hard to understand why you have certain burdens to deal with. It might also be that your own foolish actions and unwise approaches, you see them, they're coming home to roost. Perhaps even for a long time, perhaps even for the rest of your life. But nonetheless, the gospel that comes to you in this is this: God has pardoned. Not only according to the word of Moses, but according to the request of his own Son, the true Moses, who made full payment in your place. My people, never, never, never forget that gospel. And that gives hope. That gives hope always. And with this passage, our God calls us, my people. Do not allow these consequences, whether they're self-imposed or not, or anything in between. Do not allow these consequences to take over your life and to take over your outlook. Instead of spiraling down into the mire, what should you do? You should draw near to me. Come to me in prayer. Commune with me. Live in fellowship with me. And even celebrate that relationship of the free forgiveness in the blood of Christ. Draw near to me. Worship me. And realize, my people, I love that. When you do that, that's good for us to ponder. How often does it not happen that the burdens and the hardships, they weigh down on us to the point that we no longer want to come together with His people for worship anymore? We see ourselves as unworthy. We feel as if everyone around us is looking down upon us. Everyone seems happy, but I just can't be. My people, I know that you are reeling, but come to me. Seek my face. Draw near to me and worship. I know that right now it might feel as if life sucks, that you might not even know what to do with your life anymore. But what should you yet do? My people, draw near to me. Present your life and devote the rest of your life to me, to my service. For you see, that is the way of true progress. That is the way forward. And therefore, beloved, as we reel, as we feel perhaps such shame, as we lick our wounds, as we hang our heads, as we grieve, as we wrestle with our questions, let's hear our gracious God. Let's hear him calling us. Let's hear him pointing out to us, my people, despite all the negatives, realize this: my kingdom work is going on. And as such, know your burdens, your sorrows, your griefs, your heartaches, they will not go on forever. The 40 years of wandering in the desert may seem like such a long time, but the end will come. It will yet happen that even Gentiles will one day be gathered in. And just think of it, my people here in Glenbrook today. Are you not part of exactly that? And ahead is what? Ahead is the promised land. Not the foreshadowed promised land, but the real one. And in that light, press on, bearing your burdens, but always in hope, in worship, in devotion to me. That's what I love. And my people, that's the way forward. Amen. Let's now respond by singing together Psalm 103, stanzas 4 and 5.